The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle as Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood by the tall windows of the private sitting room. Her fingers traced the cool glass while her mind wandered to memories that seemed both distant and immediate. Today would be different from all the others. Today, she and William would say goodbye to a chapter of their lives that had shaped not just their marriage, but the very future of the British monarchy. The phone call had come 3 days earlier. Queen Elizabeth II, at 96, had made a decision that would send ripples through the royal family and the entire Commonwealth. She was stepping down from her official duties, not due to illness or scandal, but because she believed it was time for the younger generation to take the lead. The transition would happen gradually, but it meant William and Catherine would soon shoulder responsibilities they had been preparing for their entire married life. Catherine remembered the exact moment William had told her about his grandmother's decision. They were in their kitchen at Adelaide Cottage, sharing a quiet dinner after putting the children to bed. William had been unusually quiet throughout the meal, pushing his food around his plate instead of eating. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight she had rarely heard before. "Granny called today," he had said, setting down his fork. "She wants to step back from royal duties. The transition will begin in 6 months." The words hung in the air between them. Catherine had known this day would come eventually, but knowing something intellectually and experiencing it emotionally were entirely different things. She had reached across the table and taken his hand, feeling the slight tremor that betrayed his calm exterior. Now 3 days later, as she stood watching the morning light dance across the castle grounds, Catherine reflected on how much their lives had changed since that shy university student had first caught Prince William's attention at St. Andrews. They had been so young then, so unaware of the path that lay ahead. Their love story had unfolded under the harsh glare of media attention, every moment scrutinized, every gesture analyzed. The early years of their relationship had been a careful dance between private affection and public duty. William had been determined to give Catherine as normal a life as possible before marriage, knowing that once she said yes to his proposal, her life would never truly be her own again. They had broken up briefly in 2007, a painful separation that taught them both how much they meant to each other and how strong their foundation really was. Their wedding in 2011 had been watched by billions around the world, but Catherine remembered it most for the quiet moments. The way William's hands had shaken slightly as he placed the ring on her finger, the proud smile on his face when they were finally pronounced husband and wife, the gentle squeeze he had given her hand as they walked back down the aisle, officially beginning their journey as partners in both love and duty. The years that followed had brought joys and challenges in equal measure. The birth of Prince George had transformed them from a young married couple into parents with the weight of raising a future king. Princess Charlotte had brought a fierce independence that reminded everyone of her grandmother Diana, while Prince Louis had filled their home with laughter and chaos. Through it all, Catherine had grown into her role with a grace that surprised even the most skeptical royal watchers. She had never sought the spotlight, but she had learned to use her platform to champion causes close to her heart. Her work with early childhood development, mental health awareness, and supporting military families had earned genuine respect and admiration. William, meanwhile, had evolved from the reluctant prince who had once dreaded his future responsibilities into a confident leader ready to modernize the monarchy. His work with conservation, homelessness, and mental health had shown a depth of commitment that proved he understood the weight of his birthright. As Catherine continued to gaze out the window, she saw William walking across the courtyard returning from his morning run. Even after all these years, the sight of him still made her heart skip a beat. He looked up at the window where she stood and waved, his smile reaching her even from that distance. In a few hours, they would attend the formal ceremony where the Queen would officially announce her transition plans to the Privy Council. The implications were enormous. They would soon be taking on roles that would define not just their own lives, but the lives of their children and the future of an institution that had endured for over 1,000 years. The monarchy was changing, evolving to meet the needs of a modern world, and they would be at the center of that transformation. Catherine thought about all the people who had supported them on this journey. William's father, now King Charles, who had waited so long for his own moment to lead, Camilla, who had become an unexpected source of wisdom and support, the dedicated staff who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes to prepare them for this moment. And the British people, who had embraced Catherine as one of their own, despite her middle-class background that had once been seen as unconventional for a future queen. The weight of history pressed down on her shoulders, but it was balanced by an unwavering sense of purpose. She and William had spent years learning, preparing, and understanding what it truly meant to serve. They had traveled the world representing Britain, had met with world leaders, had comforted families in their darkest hours, and had celebrated with communities in their moments of triumph. As she heard William's footsteps on the stairs, Catherine took one last look at the peaceful morning scene outside. Soon their lives would change forever, but they would face that change together, just as they had faced everything else in their remarkable journey from university sweethearts to the future of the British crown. William entered the sitting room quietly, his running clothes damp with morning dew and perspiration. Catherine turned from the window as he approached, and without a word, he wrapped his arms around her from behind. They stood together in comfortable silence, both understanding the magnitude of what lay ahead. "I keep thinking about our wedding day," Catherine said softly, leaning back against his chest. "Do you remember what you whispered to me when we were signing the register?" William smiled, his chin resting on top of her head. "I told you that no matter what happened, we would face it together. That still holds true, you know." The ceremony that afternoon would be unlike anything the royal family had experienced in recent history. Queen Elizabeth II had chosen to make her announcement not in a grand public setting, but in the intimate surroundings of the white drawing room at Buckingham Palace, with only close family members and senior advisors present. The public announcement would come later, but this private moment would mark the true beginning of their new chapter. As they prepared for the day ahead, Catherine found herself thinking about the conversations she had shared with the Queen over the years. Their relationship had evolved slowly, built on mutual respect and understanding rather than immediate warmth. The Queen had been protective of the institution she had served for over 70 years, and she had needed to be certain that Catherine truly understood what she was committing to. The turning point had come during a private lunch at Balmoral 3 years earlier. Catherine had been nervous, as she always was during one-on-one meetings with the Queen, but something had shifted that day. They had talked about everything from gardening to global politics, and for the first time, Catherine had felt like the Queen was seeing her not just as William's wife, but as a future leader in her own right. "You have something your mother-in-law never had," the Queen had said unexpectedly, referring to the late Princess Diana. "You have patience. The monarchy requires patience above all else." Those words had stayed with Catherine ever since. Diana had been beloved for her compassion and her ability to connect with people, but her impatience with royal protocol had ultimately led to conflict and heartbreak. Catherine had learned from both Diana's triumphs and her struggles, carving out her own path that honored tradition while embracing necessary change. William finished his shower and joined Catherine in their private study, where they had spent countless hours over the past week reviewing briefing papers and preparing for their expanded roles. The transition wouldn't happen overnight, but they needed to be ready for the increased scrutiny and responsibility that would come with being next in line to the throne. "The children don't fully understand yet," William said, adjusting his tie as he prepared for the formal ceremony. "George has some idea because of his age, but Charlotte and Louis still see this as just another royal event." Catherine nodded thoughtfully. Protecting their children's privacy and normalcy had always been a priority, but that would become even more challenging as their own profiles increased. They had worked hard to give George, Charlotte, and Louis as normal a childhood as possible, sending them to regular schools and encouraging friendships outside royal circles. "We'll tell them together tonight," Catherine decided. "They need to hear it from us in our own words before they hear it from anyone else." The drive to Buckingham Palace was quiet, both William and Catherine lost in their own thoughts. The London streets were busy with their usual afternoon traffic, ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, unaware that history was being made just a few miles away. Catherine watched the familiar landmarks pass by and wondered how different this same journey would feel in 6 months' time when they held new titles and new responsibilities. At the palace, they were greeted by Sir Edward Young, the Queen's private secretary, who had become an invaluable guide through the complexities of royal protocol. His calm demeanor and decades of experience had helped them navigate countless challenging situations, and his presence today provided a reassuring sense of continuity. Her Majesty is in good spirits, he informed them as they walked through the palace corridors. She's looking forward to this transition. She believes the monarchy is in excellent hands. The white drawing room was already filled with family members when William and Catherine arrived. King Charles and Queen Camilla were speaking quietly with Princess Anne, while Prince Edward and Sophie, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, reviewed the formal documents that would make the transition official. The atmosphere was solemn but not sad, reflecting the historic nature of the moment rather than any sense of loss. Queen Elizabeth II entered the room at exactly 3 o'clock, her punctuality as precise as always. At 96, she moved more slowly than in previous years, but her posture remained regal and her eyes as sharp as ever. She was wearing a pale blue dress with her signature 3-strand pearl necklace, and the sight of her brought an immediate hush to the room. "Good afternoon, everyone," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "Today marks not an ending, but a new beginning for our family and for the institution we serve." Catherine felt William's hand find hers as they stood together, facing the woman who had dedicated her entire adult life to the crown. The Queen's gaze swept across the room, acknowledging each family member before settling on William and Catherine. "I have served as your queen for over 70 years, she continued. "It has been the greatest privilege of my life, but it is time for the next generation to take the lead. William and Catherine, you have prepared well for this moment. The monarchy will flourish under your guidance." The formal ceremony was brief but profound. Documents were signed, oaths were reaffirmed, and the careful choreography of constitutional monarchy played out in the elegant surroundings of the palace. But for Catherine, the most meaningful moment came when the Queen approached them privately after the official proceedings were complete. "I want you to know how proud I am of both of you," she said, her usually formal demeanor softening slightly. "The institution will change under your leadership, as it should. But the values that matter most, duty, service, and love of country, those will endure." Catherine felt tears prick at her eyes as the Queen embraced first William, then her. It was a rare display of affection from a woman who had spent decades maintaining careful emotional distance in public settings. The weeks following the private ceremony passed in a blur of meetings, briefings, and careful planning. The public announcement of Queen Elizabeth's transition had been met with a mixture of surprise, understanding, and overwhelming support. The British people had watched their queen serve with unwavering dedication for over 7 decades, and while change was always difficult, there was widespread acknowledgement that she had earned the right to step back on her own terms. Catherine found herself adapting to a new rhythm of life that was both exhilarating and exhausting. Her schedule, already packed with royal engagements, expanded to include new responsibilities and longer briefings. She was now receiving detailed intelligence reports about global affairs, economic briefings from the Treasury, and regular updates from the Commonwealth realms about their political situations. What struck her most was how much she had learned without realizing it. Years of accompanying William on royal visits, sitting in on meetings, and observing the careful diplomacy of royal life had prepared her for this moment in ways she hadn't fully appreciated. The shy university student who had once hidden from photographers was now confident enough to challenge ministers on policy details and offer thoughtful insights during high-level discussions. The children had taken the news better than expected, though each had reacted in their own way. Prince George, now 11, understood the historical significance and felt a mixture of pride and pressure about his own future role. Princess Charlotte, 9, had immediately wanted to know if this meant she could redecorate her room at the palace, while 6-year-old Prince Louis had been most concerned about whether they would still have movie nights as a family. "Will Daddy still read bedtime stories?" Louis had asked the night they explained the changes to them. "Of course," William had assured him, pulling his youngest son onto his lap. "Some things will never change, no matter what titles we have." Catherine had been touched by the promise, knowing how important it was for William to maintain his connection with their children, despite the increasing demands on his time. He had grown up largely without his mother after Diana's death, and he was determined that his own children would always know they came first in his heart, even when duty called. The transition period had been carefully planned to last 6 months, allowing for a gradual handover of responsibilities and public adjustment to the changes. Catherine and William were taking on more patronages, more foreign visits, and more of the constitutional duties that would soon become their primary focus. The learning curve was steep, but they were supported by experienced staff who had served the royal family for decades. One of the most meaningful moments came during a visit to a children's hospital in Liverpool. Catherine had been patron of several children's charities for years, but this visit felt different. The young patients and their families looked at her with a new level of respect and hope, understanding that she would soon have even greater influence to champion their causes. "Will you remember us when you're queen?" asked 8-year-old Emma, who was recovering from a complex heart surgery. Catherine knelt beside the little girl's bed, taking her small hand gently. "I will always remember you, Emma, and I promise that helping children like you will always be one of my most important jobs." The moment stayed with Catherine long after they left the hospital. She realized that the titles and ceremonies were just the framework. The real work was in these personal connections, these promises made to individual people who needed to believe that their future queen truly cared about their lives. Meanwhile, William was experiencing his own evolution as he prepared for his expanded role. His work with conservation had always been a passion, but now he was being briefed on environmental policies that would affect billions of people around the world. His meetings with world leaders were no longer just diplomatic courtesy calls. They were substantial discussions about trade agreements, climate action, and international cooperation. The couple made a conscious decision to approach their new responsibilities as a true partnership. Rather than dividing duties based on traditional gender roles, they chose to focus on their individual strengths and shared passions. Catherine's background in art history and her natural empathy made her particularly effective in cultural and humanitarian roles, while William's military training and environmental advocacy positioned him well for security and conservation issues. Their first major test came during a state visit from the President of France. As the most senior working royals after King Charles and Queen Camilla, William and Catherine were expected to play a crucial role in the diplomatic proceedings. The visit included a state banquet at Buckingham Palace, where Catherine wore the Queen Mary Diamond Riviere necklace for the first time, a symbol of her growing status within the family hierarchy. The French president had specifically requested time with William and Catherine, recognizing that they represented the future of British-French relations. Their discussions covered everything from economic cooperation to environmental protection, and Catherine found herself contributing substantively to conversations about education policy and cultural exchange programs. "You have both grown tremendously since I first met you," the French president told them privately. "France looks forward to working with you in your expanded roles." As spring turned to summer, the pace of change continued to accelerate. Catherine was appointed to new positions within several major charities, while William took on additional responsibilities related to the Commonwealth. They traveled to Canada together for their first official tour as future heirs to the throne, a trip that served as both a diplomatic mission and a public introduction to their new status. The Canadian tour was particularly significant because it included visits to Indigenous communities, an area where the royal family had been working to build stronger, more respectful relationships. Catherine had spent months preparing for these encounters, learning about Indigenous history and contemporary challenges, determined to approach these meetings with genuine understanding rather than ceremonial politeness. During a visit to a First Nations community in British Columbia, Catherine participated in a traditional welcome ceremony and listened to stories from elders about their experiences and hopes for the future. The conversations were sometimes difficult, touching on historical injustices and ongoing struggles, but they were also filled with hope for reconciliation and partnership. "Your willingness to listen, truly listen, means more than you might realize," said Elder Mary Whitehorse after sharing her family's story with Catherine. "We see in you someone who wants to understand, not just visit." These words resonated deeply with Catherine, reinforcing her commitment to using her platform for meaningful engagement rather than superficial appearances. She was learning that being a future queen meant being a bridge between different communities, different perspectives, and different visions of what Britain could become. As autumn approached, the reality of their changing roles became increasingly tangible. Catherine was now receiving the same security briefings as senior government ministers, sitting in on Privy Council meetings as an observer, and participating in the weekly audiences that would soon become her responsibility. The weight of constitutional monarchy was settling on her shoulders, but rather than feeling overwhelmed, she found herself energized by the complexity and importance of the work. The most challenging aspect of the transition was learning to balance transparency with discretion. As future queen, Catherine would need to remain politically neutral while still being informed about every major decision affecting the realm. She was learning to listen carefully, ask thoughtful questions, and offer insights without crossing the constitutional boundaries that kept the monarchy above partisan politics. William was experiencing similar challenges as he prepared to take on his father's role as heir apparent. His weekly meetings with intelligence officials had expanded to include detailed briefings on international threats, economic vulnerabilities, and domestic security concerns. The carefree prince who had once been photographed dancing at nightclubs was now reviewing classified documents about cybersecurity threats and terrorist activities. The couple's relationship had deepened throughout this period of intense preparation. The shared stress and responsibility had brought them closer together, creating an even stronger foundation for the challenges ahead. They had developed their own private rituals for processing the complexities of their roles, including late-night walks through the gardens at Kensington Palace and quiet Sunday morning discussions over coffee before the children woke up. "Sometimes I wonder if we're losing ourselves in all of this," Catherine confided one evening as they walked hand in hand through the peaceful gardens. "I don't think we're losing ourselves," William replied thoughtfully. "I think we're discovering who we really are when everything we care about is at stake." Their children had begun to notice the changes in their parents' routines and responsibilities. George, in particular, had become more serious and thoughtful, asking questions about history and government that showed his growing awareness of his own future role. Charlotte had started paying closer attention to her mother's work, sometimes asking to accompany Catherine on visits to local charities. Louis, still the family comedian, seemed largely unaffected by the changes, though he had started incorporating royal protocols into his imaginative play with friends. The family's annual summer holiday at Balmoral had taken on new significance this year. It would be one of the last times they could enjoy the Scottish estate as a relatively private family before their lives became even more public. Queen Elizabeth had specifically invited them to spend extra time there, recognizing that the peaceful environment would provide valuable opportunities for informal mentoring and family bonding. During long walks across the Highland landscape, the Queen shared stories and insights that no formal briefing could provide. She talked about the loneliness of leadership, the importance of maintaining personal relationships despite public duties, and the delicate balance between tradition and progress that would define their future reign. "The monarchy survives because it evolves," she explained during one particularly memorable conversation. "But evolution must be gradual, thoughtful. The people need to feel that change is happening with them, not to them." Catherine absorbed these lessons eagerly, understanding that she was receiving wisdom earned through decades of experience. The Queen's insights about managing public expectations, working with difficult politicians, and maintaining family unity during times of crisis would prove invaluable in the years to come. As their time in Scotland drew to a close, Catherine found herself reflecting on how much had changed since that first nervous meeting with the Queen years earlier. She was no longer the uncertain young woman seeking approval. She had become a confident partner in the most important conversation about the monarchy's future. The return to London marked the beginning of the final phase of the transition. With just 2 months remaining before the formal ceremony that would mark their new status, the pace of preparation intensified. Catherine was now participating in all the major royal functions, standing beside William as an equal partner rather than a supportive spouse. One of the most significant challenges during this period was managing media attention while maintaining focus on their work. The international press had become fascinated with the transition, analyzing every public appearance for signs of how the couple would approach their future roles. Catherine had learned to navigate this attention with grace, but the constant scrutiny remained one of the most difficult aspects of royal life. The breakthrough moment came during a state dinner for the Emperor of Japan. Catherine had been nervous about the high-stakes diplomatic environment, but as the evening progressed, She found herself genuinely enjoying the complex conversations about trade, culture, and international cooperation. When the emperor specifically complimented her on her understanding of Japanese art history and its influence on British collections, she realized she had truly found her voice as a future queen. "You have grown into this role naturally," the Japanese ambassador told her privately. "There is something authentic about your approach that people respond to." As winter approached, Catherine and William made the decision to conduct their first major interview together since the transition announcement. They wanted to speak directly to the British people about their vision for the future, their understanding of the challenges ahead, and their commitment to serving with humility and dedication. The interview, conducted at Kensington Palace in the same room where they had announced their engagement years earlier, was both personal and profound. They spoke about their children, their hopes for the Commonwealth, and their determination to modernize the monarchy while respecting its essential traditions. "We don't take this responsibility lightly," William said during the interview. "We understand that we serve at the pleasure of the British people, and we're committed to earning that trust every single day." Catherine added, "This isn't about us as individuals. It's about an institution that has served this country for over 1,000 years, and our job is to make sure it continues to serve for another 1,000 years." The interview was broadcast on a Sunday evening in November, watched by over 20 million people in Britain and millions more around the world. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with viewers praising the couple's sincerity, their obvious partnership, and their thoughtful approach to the massive responsibility they were about to assume. As the final weeks of preparation began, Catherine felt a growing sense of excitement mixed with nervous anticipation. Everything in her life had led to this moment, this opportunity to serve her adopted country alongside the man she loved. The shy university student was gone, replaced by a confident woman ready to help lead a nation into the future. The morning of the final ceremony dawned crisp and clear, with winter sunlight streaming through the tall windows of Buckingham Palace. Catherine woke early, her mind immediately focused on the historic day ahead. In just a few hours, she and William would officially become the Prince and Princess of Wales, inheriting titles that carried the weight of centuries of tradition and the hopes of millions of people. The ceremony would take place in Westminster Abbey, the same magnificent church where they had been married, where William's mother had been memorialized, and where monarchs had been crowned for nearly 1,000 years. The symbolism was not lost on Catherine, as she prepared for what many were calling the most significant royal transition. Since Queen Elizabeth's coronation in 1953, her morning routine was deliberately calm and familiar. She had learned over the years that maintaining personal rituals helped ground her during moments of intense public scrutiny. A quiet breakfast with William and the children, followed by individual time for reflection and preparation, had become her standard approach to important events. The children were excited but somewhat overwhelmed by the attention surrounding the day. George understood the historical significance and had spent the previous evening asking thoughtful questions about what his parents' new roles would mean for the family. Charlotte was fascinated by the ceremonial aspects and had already announced her intention to design her own tiara someday. Louis was most concerned about whether he would still be allowed to play football in the palace gardens. "Today changes some things, but not the most important things," Catherine told them over breakfast. "We're still the same family. We still love each other the same way. And you're still our most important job." The morning was filled with final preparations and brief meetings with key staff members who would support them in their expanded roles. Catherine's private secretary reviewed the day's schedule one final time, while William met with his father to discuss the transition of specific responsibilities and ongoing projects. King Charles had been particularly supportive throughout the entire process, understanding better than anyone the unique pressures and opportunities that came with being heir to the throne. His own long wait for the crown had given him valuable perspective on how to balance personal desires with public duty. Lessons he had shared generously. With his son and daughter-in-law, "You're ready for this," he assured them during a private family moment before leaving for the Abbey. The institution is in excellent hands. The journey to Westminster Abbey was a public procession that allowed thousands of well-wishers to line the streets of London. Catherine and William traveled in the same state carriage that had carried them on their wedding day, a deliberate choice that connected this moment to their earlier commitment to each other and to the British people. The crowds were enormous and enthusiastic, waving flags and calling out messages of support. Catherine waved and smiled, but her mind was focused on the ceremony ahead and the promises she would make not just to the British people, but to the 16 Commonwealth realms that recognized the British monarch as their head of state. Inside Westminster Abbey, 2,000 guests had gathered to witness the historic transition. World leaders, Commonwealth representatives, religious figures, and members of the public selected through a national lottery filled the ancient pews. The diversity of the congregation reflected the modern, multicultural Britain that Catherine and William would soon represent. The ceremony itself was a careful blend of ancient tradition and contemporary relevance. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who had married Catherine and William 14 years earlier, presided over the proceedings with dignity and warmth. The liturgy included prayers in multiple languages, reflecting the global nature of the Commonwealth, while maintaining the essential Christian elements that had defined such ceremonies for centuries. When the moment came for Catherine and William to make their vows of service, the Abbey fell into complete silence. Their words were simple but profound, promising to serve with humility, to protect the most vulnerable, to promote unity and diversity, and to uphold the constitutional principles that made democratic monarchy possible. I, Catherine, promise to serve the people of Britain and the Commonwealth with dedication, compassion, and integrity, she said, her voice clear and strong. I pledge to use the privileges of my position to build bridges, to give voice to the voiceless, and to work for a future worthy of the sacrifices made by previous generations. William's vows were equally moving, connecting his personal commitment to Catherine with his public duty to the realm. Together, we will face the challenges of our time with courage and wisdom, always remembering that we serve not for our own glory, but for the common good. The most emotional moment came when Queen Elizabeth, despite her age and the physical demands of the ceremony, rose from her seat to personally present Catherine and William with the symbols of their new roles. The Prince of Wales feathers, the ceremonial sword, and the ancient ring that had been worn by princes of Wales for over 6 centuries were transferred from grandmother to grandson in a moment that captured the continuity of the monarchy across generations. As the Queen placed the Prince of Wales ring on William's hand, she spoke words that had been used in similar ceremonies for hundreds of years, but which seemed particularly meaningful in this moment of transition. With this ring, you accept the responsibility to serve, to lead, and to unite. May you wear it with wisdom and humility. The ceremony concluded with the singing of the national anthem, but the real power of the moment came in the silence that followed. 2,000 people in Westminster Abbey, and millions more watching around the world, sat in contemplation of what they had just witnessed. A new chapter in royal history had begun, led by a couple who had proven their commitment to service and their understanding of the responsibilities they carried. As they left the Abbey, Catherine felt a profound sense of completion and beginning simultaneously. The shy university student who had caught a prince's eye was gone forever, replaced by a confident woman ready to help lead a nation and a commonwealth into an uncertain but hopeful future. The public response to the ceremony was overwhelmingly positive, with commentators praising the dignity of the proceedings and the obvious sincerity of Catherine and William's commitment to their new roles. Social media was filled with messages of support and hope, while traditional media focused on the historical significance of the moment and its implications for the future of the monarchy. That evening, as Catherine and William returned to Kensington Palace with their children, they found a quiet moment to reflect on the magnitude of what had just occurred. Their lives had changed forever, but so had their opportunity to make a positive difference in the world. The months following the ceremony brought a new rhythm to life that was both exhilarating and demanding. Catherine and William had officially become the Prince and Princess of Wales, but more importantly, they had become the visible future of the British monarchy. Every decision they made, every cause they championed, and every public appearance they undertook now carried additional weight and scrutiny. Catherine threw herself into her expanded role with characteristic determination and grace. Her focus on early childhood development had evolved into a comprehensive initiative involving government ministers, academic researchers, and community organizations across Britain. She was no longer just a patron offering ceremonial support. She was a driving force behind policy changes that would affect millions of families. Her work took her to some of Britain's most challenging communities, where she listened to parents struggling with poverty, mental health issues, and lack of educational opportunities. These visits were not photo opportunities, but genuine fact-finding missions that informed her advocacy at the highest levels of government. During a visit to a children's center in Manchester, Catherine met Sarah, a young mother who had been helped by programs Catherine had championed. 6 months ago, I didn't know how I was going to give my daughter the start in life she deserved, Sarah explained. The support I received changed everything. Knowing that someone like you actually cares enough to fight for families like mine, that gives me hope. These personal connections continued to fuel Catherine's passion for her work. She understood that her privileged position came with the responsibility to advocate for those who had no voice in the corridors of power. Her briefing papers now included detailed analyses of social policy, economic indicators affecting families, and international best practices in child development. William, meanwhile, had embraced his role as a global advocate for environmental conservation with renewed energy. His Earthshot Prize had expanded into a worldwide movement, bringing together innovators, governments, and businesses to address climate change. His meetings now included heads of state, tech billionaires, and Nobel Prize winners, all united in the urgent work of protecting the planet for future generations. The couple's partnership had strengthened under the pressure of their increased responsibilities. They had developed an efficient system for sharing information, coordinating their schedules, and supporting each other through the most challenging moments. Their weekly private meetings had become essential for maintaining both their professional effectiveness and their personal connection. I keep thinking about that conversation we had in the garden months ago, Catherine said during one of their Sunday morning talks, about whether we were losing ourselves in all of this. William smiled, pouring fresh coffee for both of them. And what's your conclusion now? I think we've found out who we really are, she replied. All the preparation, all the uncertainty, it was leading us to this. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. Their children had adapted remarkably well to their parents' increased profile and responsibilities. George had shown particular maturity, understanding that his future role required him to learn about the world beyond his immediate experience. He had started reading newspapers and asking sophisticated questions about current events during family dinners. Charlotte had channeled her natural confidence into advocacy for causes she cared about, particularly animal welfare and environmental protection. She had convinced her parents to let her participate in a school presentation about conservation, where she spoke passionately about protecting endangered species. Even at 9 years old, her natural leadership abilities were becoming apparent. Louis continued to be the family's source of joy and laughter, seemingly unaffected by the changes around him. His main concern remained whether his parents would still have time for their weekly movie nights and weekend football matches in the garden. The family's commitment to maintaining these normal moments had become even more important as their public duties expanded. Catherine insisted on being present for bedtime stories whenever possible, while William made sure to attend school events and sports matches despite his packed schedule. They understood that their children's sense of security and normalcy was crucial, not just for their personal happiness, but for their future ability to serve effectively. One of the most significant moments of their new roles came during a state visit to Australia and New Zealand. As the Prince and Princess of Wales, they were representing not just Britain, but the entire Commonwealth in these crucial relationships. The tour was their first major international assignment in their new capacity, and its success would set the tone for their future diplomatic work. The Australian portion of the visit was particularly meaningful because of the ongoing Republican debate in the country. Many Australians questioned whether they needed a British monarch as their head of state, and Catherine and William understood that their conduct during the visit could influence public opinion for generations to come. Rather than avoiding the Republican question, they addressed it directly during a public forum in Sydney. We respect whatever decision the Australian people make about their future, William said. Our relationship with Australia goes far beyond constitutional arrangements. It's built on shared values, common history, and genuine friendship, Catherine added. Whether as part of the Commonwealth or as an independent republic, Australia will always be family to us. Our job is to serve, not to impose our presence where it's not wanted. This honest, respectful approach resonated strongly with Australian audiences. Even Republican-leaning newspapers praised their maturity and diplomatic skill. The visit concluded with record-high approval ratings and renewed support for maintaining the constitutional monarchy. At least for the foreseeable future. The New Zealand portion of the tour provided opportunities to deepen their understanding of Indigenous rights and reconciliation. Catherine's meetings with Maori leaders built on her earlier work with Indigenous communities in Canada, creating a foundation for future collaboration on issues affecting Native peoples throughout the Commonwealth. During a traditional welcome ceremony in Rotorua, Catherine participated in a hangi greeting and listened to ancient chants that told the story of the land and its people. The experience moved her deeply, reinforcing her commitment to using her platform to amplify marginalized voices and promote cultural understanding. Your willingness to learn our ways, to truly engage with our culture, shows respect that we haven't always received from royal visitors, said Dr. Murata Mita, a prominent Maori academic. We see in you someone who understands that true leadership means serving all people, not just those who look like you. Back in Britain, the couple's increased visibility had coincided with several national challenges that tested their leadership abilities. Economic pressures, social divisions, and political uncertainty had created an atmosphere of anxiety that required careful royal navigation. Catherine and William had to provide stability and continuity while remaining constitutionally neutral. During a particularly difficult period when unemployment reached concerning levels, Catherine made an unprecedented decision to visit job centers and speak directly with people struggling to find work. The visits were conducted with minimal media presence, focusing on genuine listening rather than publicity. I wanted to understand what people are really going through, she explained to her private secretary. How can we effectively support programs to help unemployed people if we don't understand their daily reality? These visits led to the creation of a new royal initiative focused on skills training and job creation, working in partnership with businesses and local governments. The program was careful to supplement rather than replace government efforts, but it provided valuable additional resources and royal visibility to encourage broader participation. As their first year in their new roles drew to a close, Catherine and William reflected on how much they had learned and accomplished. The transition that had begun with Queen Elizabeth's announcement had evolved into a confident, effective partnership that was reshaping public expectations of royal service. The defining moment came during their annual Christmas broadcast, a tradition that allowed them to speak directly to the nation about the year's challenges and hopes for the future. Standing together in the same room at Windsor Castle, where they had received the news of their changing roles, they addressed the British people and the Commonwealth with warmth, wisdom, and genuine optimism. This has been a year of change for our family and for the monarchy, Catherine said, but it has also been a year that reminded us why this institution matters. In times of uncertainty, people need symbols of continuity, sources of inspiration, and leaders who genuinely care about their welfare, William continued. We have learned that the privilege of service comes with profound responsibility. Every day we are reminded that the crown belongs not to us but to the people we serve. Our job is to be worthy of that trust,